Now,
Hey, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of the SOPP, the Southern Oregon Progressive Podcast. I'm Kevin Bell, as always. It's a pleasure to have everybody on here. And joined with me, I'm with Betsy Cunningham, my co host. Betsy,
I'm
we
waiting.
have another Friday election special talking about plannings and all that good stuff that goes on behind the scenes in the Douglas County Commissioner's race. We're joined with our candidates, Andrew and Lori, if you guys want to introduce yourself.
Ladies first.
Oh, very good. Hi, everybody. My name is Lori Wick, and vote for the number 4, wick.com, to learn a little bit more about me. And I'm glad to be here tonight. And thank you.
How you doing? Andrew Rosales. I'm running for County Commissioner position number 3. I'm also happy to be here. You guys have seen me before, so this should be an interesting conversation. And yeah, I'm ready to jump right into it.
Oh, maybe I should also announce that I'm running for position number 1 against Cress, the incumbent Cress.
And we really appreciate all of you running against the current incumbents. I mean, it's going to be a heavy year, and I'm really excited to have some great candidates like yourself. And yes, thank you, Andrew. We've had you on the past before where we deep dived into the budget. That's actually one of our more popular episodes if you look at it, and things like that. So it's good to have you back on so we can deep dive into some of this other stuff. Betsy, do you have any questions to take it away, or?
Just kind of lay the framework that it kind of came out of a conversation of recent things that have been going on regarding land use issues, right? And the bigger question really comes down to, who's going to control the land and for what purpose, right? And who's to whose benefit. So, in that very broad sense, and it impacts, technicalities of zoning law, but also the ideas of, how you're going to get more affordable housing, and what kind of economic development, right, you attract, what is planning and zone for, has all that kind of implication in it. So you guys can, wherever you want to take this and, where you want to start.
Well, and I mean, one thing that we definitely can say that we've seen recently, and Andrew was just talking about this before we started recording, was it RT 120, I believe, that was starting to be talked around here locally?
RT20. RT20.
If you're muted, Andrew, if you wanted to say something to that effect.
Yeah, that's correct.
RT20.
It is RT20. And just a brief overview on that. What the commissioners are actually trying to get pushed through and did push through, at least temporarily, I'll say, is they wanted to add the ability into our land use plan to zone these certain areas RT20. And what RT stands for, I believe it's rural transition. And they're saying that those plots of land had no commercial use. So they weren't designating any land RT or RT20. It was just adjusting the county's master plan to add those options into it.
Well,
Okay, so
a little bit of what I understand would be that they could take 80-acre parcels and break it off into 20-acre parcels, and it was non-resource land. So if you had in like intergenerational families passing on your 80 acres and you had this non-resource land, it could make it hard for some Douglas County families to try to keep that land up. So it gives a little bit of breathing room, possibly a pro part to it, to be able to break that 20 acres off, and you can share that with your family. And so that could be one aspect of it. And there was some concerns about turning this non-resource land into a different zone, so then it could be rezoned again if it met certain criteria through the planning department. But again, it had to go through LUBA to be able to, and it's been through LUBA a few times and been rejected, and so they're going to put it forward again. And Yeah, and so these 20-acre parcels, it could potentially make this land more valuable as well, lifting this status of non-resource land there for them to be able to potentially build a house. And then there was concerns from our public comments to the commissioners when I attended the meeting that there was concern about water rights or tapping into the wells, or that there would be this 120-acre parcel in the middle of a lot of like cattle fields or um, different agriculture lands in these 80-acre parcels out there. So that was a little touch point I got from a little research I did around it and hearing some people's feedback in the commissioners meeting.
Yeah, that's a great point. And whenever we went to the commissioners meeting, there was a public comment period that was opened up before that. And what kind of stood out to me is that because there wasn't any land being designated, and this was just putting tools in the toolbox, there was, 90% of the people that were there were to speak out against it. And I found that personally a little odd because I do believe in local control. And I do believe that the local population should decide for themselves kind of how they want to use their land for the best of the population. So giving the commissioners or giving the leaders in the community more options of how to designate land gives us more options in the future. So what really stood out is that it's not the rule, it's the trust. Nobody in that room trusted that these new abilities would be used for the best purpose of the population. And it's pretty striking that you can just look at what they tried to pass and get to that same conclusion in that they didn't ask for 5-acre lots. They didn't ask for half-acre lots. They didn't ask for anything that anybody in the area could actually afford. 20 acres right now is going to cost you $500,000. That's before you start to build, before you start to run electrical, before you start to do any of that. So the affordability of those lots is well beyond what the common population of Douglas County can ever consider living in. So, there's a trust issue there that what is the point of this all the way? I did hear one of the commissioners supposedly said that this is to bring in more of the folks that want that 4-H lifestyle. I don't know what that actually means. Last time I checked, 4-H was what, head, hands, heart, and health, not acreage. But apparently it changed in their eyes. So yeah, very good.
Yeah, and for the 4-H lifestyle, having your pet sheep and that kind of stuff, that like you to your point, that would maybe be more accessible for 5-acre lots. And maybe the 20-acre lots could draw in outside people to that would afford it. But another thing that I spoke to was um, tracking per the lack of trust who has these non-resource lands
Right.
and it increase it will automatically increase the value. So when it turns non-resource into this alternative zoning, and are any of their major donors owners of non-resource lands? And I'm wondering, like, especially since some of them are like very major donors, if they own some of these non-resource lands, that will help them be able to break off their parcels into 20-acre parcels and sell them off, and to take a note of who has these non-resource lands before it gets out there. So a part of that lack of trust is when you are networked and you're working your network of opportunities, you're staying in that social circle of wealth, and connecting each other up with more opportunities instead of looking out for opportunities for the average person in Douglas County. And that was my main concern, and I expressed it on the record as we should take note as to who owns these non-resource lands.
Well, and you hit the nail on the head that it starts right now at the lack of trust in the community, which has been precipitated by a lack of transparency in the community. So my question probably from the audience that's watching this and mine is, what's the steps that you as county commissioners can, in regards to making planning decisions, have some of that transparency out for the community? And then, and my next point after you answer that question is going into, we have seen the continued, you know, erosion of the good faith in our community and county government from the continued selling of our county parks and our public resources and things like that. So, we could maybe shift it over there because if I'm correct, that's also kind of a planning.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh,
So,
go ahead.
oh, go ahead, Lori, if you'd like.
As far as transparency and the erosion of that, I think part of the deal is term limits, and the whole reason why we have term limits is to limit that bureaucratic cronyism, that you're connected and networked with wealth and and hooking each other up in policy that gives advantage, and it's not very obvious, but when you know it's happening, it seems a little unfair. So part of that transparency is to talk about it, try to like, for example, I really appreciated Andrew's point with this non-resource land. If you're going to divide it, maybe be able to, if it's 80 acres, that you can chunk off 20 acres, but that there's some policy around it, that it's 5 acre lots or a certain amount that can free it up, unless it is that this 20 acre can be rezoned again into 5 acre lots because it's been rezoned. So there's a lot of unknowns to that. But that transparency is to discuss those kinds of things. One of the things that Boyce said was when he voted for it, I appreciated that he is supportive of people having their rights to do what they want to do with their property. But what he said was, all that it's going to do is make it where I have more neighbors. And then what popped in my brain was, do you live on non-resource land if you're going to have more neighbors out of this policy change? And so part of the transparency is to be able to call out that one of the examples that Freeman said was that there was a mobile home on sale for a 5 acre lot for like almost $350,000, and that this policy change would free up some more land and maybe not make these types of housing is expensive out there as it is. Well, those types of examples don't equate. And so when you give examples that don't add up, or there's some questioning behind it, then you go, okay, well, I definitely lean on to people with property and their rights. But when it just keeps stacking, the odds keep stacking, that policy keeps winners winning, and the other average people aren't able to level up, that's where it's difficult. So transparency is calling it out, saying what it is. I really would I heard Freeman, I went and talked to him after the meeting, and he mentioned the families with the 80 acres, and I think somebody from the public spoke to that as well. And it makes a lot of sense, that part. So you can speak to that, and that's transparent. But just kind of sharing the public's view of why you're voting this way, the real life people's circumstances. That's transparency. And saying that you've looked into the pros and cons of it and giving both sides of it. And another thing that happened when we were presenting, I was in the middle of how I felt, or when I did my kind of just a little research on it, because I'm not an expert on this. It's a very technical issue, and I understand that. And there was like 70 pages, I think, of just the report of what they were presented with. I don't remember, maybe 40 to 70 pages. We all understand there's a lot of information and it's technical. So even just admitting that, but when people are speaking to it in public, what I also heard from the commissioners was like, you're bad public people for speaking against this. Like I said, I was in the middle of the road with it, but when I heard people in the public speaking to it, I leaned towards, okay, I'm going to go to the no side versus the neutral side when they asked you to present. And the transparency part is also when you're the commissioner and you're not open to public comments at the end where people can come up and speak to what else is said up there, that you're not blasting the public for their view, that you hear them and you understand instead of putting them down for having a different view. That's being transparent too, is saying, I hear you, I'm listening to all the sides, and I'm putting it out there that way. There.
Yeah, yeah, very good. So like I said earlier, I think we need to build trust back, and that's really kind of gets to the heart of the issue. And there's a few things we can do. The first thing is that we should probably adopt a do no harm stance, first and foremost when it comes to some of this land use. And I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. Over here on the Callahan Ridge recently, there was I believe it was Mills something Park. So somebody correct me if I'm wrong. That the county
It was just
decided that
called
they
Mills
want.
Park.
Okay, very good. The county decided that they wanted to log. And whenever they did that, they sent out a notice, and the people at the bottom of the ridge went to the county and said, hey, we have some very serious concerns that if you clear cut this, there will be a landslide and it'll come across our land, blocking our way where we can't get in and out. And the county just decided to do it anyways. And yeah, the county benefited a little bit from the lumber sales, but the harm that it caused to the citizens of Douglas County, we can't, land use should benefit the people of the county. It shouldn't create more headaches and more roadblocks. And after that happened, whenever they wanted, they called the county for some help just to clear the road and try to get some of that stuff out of the way. The county refused because then you're admitting liability, right? So you got to start there with the let's not cause harm to people just to get a little bit more revenue. As far as accountability and transparency, the one thing that the county does right now that really bugs me, is that whenever we have public comment, it is literally we talk at the county commissioners and then the county commissioners talk back at us. There's zero conversation. There's no questions, there's no clarification, there's no fact finding. And that's why we don't trust them. And that's why we want, more transparency, because if we understood the logic behind the decision, maybe we could get on board with it. If we understood the safeguards that were put in place to ensure that our worst, imaginations don't come true, then maybe we can, vote for that thing. But whenever you refuse to talk about it and you refuse to have a conversation, it sure feels like you're hiding it. So the first thing that I would do if lucky enough to be elected is we're going to start having working groups again where we actually talk about these subjects and have conversations. Are we going to come to agreement? Probably not. But if we can get to a place where we're all equally unhappy, that's probably the right place to be. And that's where you build trust, right? Where you're willing to give up a little bit and have those hard conversations. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, and I like the transparency of maybe even having a public meeting where we have those experts there. Like to Andrew's point, there's no reason why we can't have a little work group meeting and put it out there during the day, or a Zoom meeting that the public's invited for questions and answers about these
Yeah.
policies, and have our planning department speak to it. There is nothing wrong with that.
Right.
Um, yeah,
I
that's
think
part
what
of transparency too.
This
yeah.
discussion reminds me there's actually a structure, I think, within the planning and land use issues that are these citizen committees. And I think it's citizen participation committees, and I haven't really paid attention to their existence for a long, long time. So I don't know how functioning they are. But in theory, in some of these areas, there is that potential for to get community input in land use and planning underneath the county stuff. Um, One of the things I want to be, um, sometimes it's problematic to say people can do whatever they want with their land. For one, it's not really their land. Okay. Land and water and resources that anyone may be able to have under their temporary control doesn't belong to just here and now. So there is a future consideration of the people and the planet. And the other
Yeah.
thing is, what you do as a property owner is not in isolation when it comes to how you use your land, what you build on it, how you use the water, and all those other resources
Mhm.
either. And so that's the whole reason why we have zoning, that why we have planning and zoning laws and those restrictions. Some of them are for just nonsensical elitist reasons, which are single family dwelling suburbs. Okay, I mean suburbs were had grow out of the need for housing around before World War II, and they were created in these ways to get it housing ownership into lower income people, right? And so there was a noble cause, but they became very racist, isolationist, elitist, and so and the other problem I see, and actually when we were talking about this, I said, shit, I should have invited, harassed Richard Chasm to be here because not only does he a whole lot of knowledge about forest land, he was a realtor in this county for years. So
Well, and
so I
no, please go
I
ahead.
don't really know that much about some of these issues and details as somebody such as he. But part of the there's these problems of when you have divide up forest land, right, or farmland or potential, or was in rural areas, right? And so they look at it, it's hilly, and even grapes can't go there. I don't know how that assessment's made. I got no way to even assess that. So my little bit of understanding of listening to this stuff historically, this land use planning, I was in one of the meetings years and years ago when one of the iterations of this one was before the county commissioners, and there weren't even always the same county commissioners, right? But the problem is who decides that
Yeah.
non-use land, because it's not being used doesn't mean it doesn't theoretically have a potential commercial value. So that's for
Right.
one, right? So somebody may want their own little estate of 20 acres with nothing on it, so they don't have to have neighbors right next door.
Right.
That doesn't mean it's non-use. So I think the problem is it comes down to even your kind of quiz, Lori, about it being, well, who is it? So I think that does go to the transparency. But you were talking about the landslide issue, and I think Kevin had asked about parks. So I don't know how much, you think about that other part of land use resource, right? One is this zoning, but how about what do we do with the property that's owned by the county, for example? What
Right.
is it? What purpose does that serve, and what should it be used for? So that's a question after my soapbox.
So yeah, absolutely. It was just recently that the county sold a park north of here, right off of Curtin. I don't remember the name of the park. Somebody can help me out.
Pass Creek.
There's been
Pass.
so many as of lately, and if it's not the park, they've at least sold the timber on it.
Right,
It's Pass
right.
Creek that's up there. We used to stop there because it had a restroom. Okay, that's what I know about Pass Creek Park.
Yeah, in all the feedback that I heard, especially from the local community, was that they were pretty upset that they were selling the park, and then the justification for the reason of selling it didn't make a whole lot of sense because the justification I heard is that it wasn't making any money, but the Parks Department as a whole is one of the few departments that is self-sufficient. So maybe that one park wasn't making money, but as long as the Parks Department as a whole was okay, then why are we taking resources away from the county? And this is going to veer off track a little bit. One of the things that the county just doesn't do is they don't have a 5 or 10 year plan. And part of that 5 or 10 year plan should be land use because the only way we're going to attract new people or new businesses is to be able to have an educated and willing workforce, and then there's got to be those creature comforts, right? Those intangibles where we could offer companies to say, hey, come to Roseburg because we have all these wonderful parks and they're all under community or under county control, and your quality of life will be so great. And we designated this area for housing, and it's going to be, some of it's going to be apartments and some of it's going to be housing, but it's going to be diverse, and we're going to be able to, to house your workforce. And we're going to work on bringing more people to the community college and educating them so that the workforce is ready to go. And it's fun to look at these things in isolation, but whenever you look at them in isolation, they don't necessarily tie to every other part of what we're trying to do. So that's a long-winded way of saying that selling a park is so short-sighted and so on the side of what we shouldn't be doing that there's no way that these guys have a plan whatsoever moving forward. Um, I'll stop there and let Lori go.
Oh, yeah, I definitely think so. I've had it and I've shared this one with in my own little podcast with you guys before that we've had people in these pocket communities come out to the commissioners and say, "Hey, don't sell the parks. Don't we want it? We'll take care of them." I mean, hey, there is no loss there. Why would you do that? And then they still sold it and out from under them. And then like towards the green area, there was a park like that, and
Mhm.
people were like, "Our children have nowhere to go." And my husband likes a game. I don't know what the modern version of it what is. Maybe somebody can help me out, but there was an older version of it called Sim City. And to Larry's point in the chat, he's saying aren't planning and zoning two different functions? Like planning comes first, and if it's not done well with the municipalities in place, your water and electricity and stuff like that, then thus the zoning suffers and enforcement is non-existent. And so with that in mind, these parks, when they are sold, and we have places like in the green area that has no park for our youth, and we have these young budding families, that's a perfect area for young families, and we have no parks for them. Once again, we're not looking out for the future for well-planned communities, because really effective and progressive and uplifting communities have parks. I mean, that's a basic, and art. And it's proven that when you're thinking about these types of I know that's a little bit of the stretch off the planning and zoning, but if you have parks in place, then you're thinking about families and they want to come and live in that community and they feel good and taken care of. And like the taxes are paying for something, whether it comes through our county or not, at least we're paying attention to it. And I also understand there's been a lot of donations, like people, philanthropists that care about Douglas County have donated to the county, and maybe they've sold that. That's been frustrating too to people. Like people have left a legacy and it was just kind of not taken care of. And when you are in a place of leadership and somebody's donated something like a park or land for future generations, they want to leave a legacy behind. They don't want it being tromped on by, short-sightedness and just immediate resource extraction for logs and stuff like that. That's really frustrating.
Well, and I have to agree with Lori on this one, and it speaks to what me and Betsy have talked about earlier on this show, which is the trend of modern conservatism towards the more cash grabby, short-sighted, militaristic police grab, just things that grab the populist view of essentially police state, and that's what I think what my fundamental disagreement with, people on the other side of the aisle might be, which is, public resources are meant for like libraries and daycares and schools and healthcare and anything that can be the benefit of the community. You know what I mean? Even if it is abstract things that could be like products in the female restrooms. Something that men or things that seem inconsequential that really, just like Andrew, you were talking about the no harm strategy. The plan that we put people first before profits or anything like that. That's the whole reason I got involved in 2016, 2015 in politics in the first place. I was 14. And of course, high school wasn't fun, but the world wasn't fun either. And then they came out with the Bernie Sanders campaign, which was, people over politics. Why people over profit? Why do we have to have this extraction resource mentality when, frankly, we live in a very prosperous and industrious society already?
Well, one of those things, Kevin, I think we have to help young people change their mindset a little bit. Like every time I hear county land, what I hear is my land. And I take that personally. That is my land. I live in this county. I'm a 137,000 whatever owner of that land. Same thing with federal land. When I hear federal land, it's not the federal government. That's my land and that's your land. And why would only a select few people get to benefit off of our collectively owned land? So, get angry and get pissed off what they're doing to your land because it is yours. And we need to reclaim it a little bit. So yeah,
Well,
very
and
good.
since we're speaking on parks and the benefit of planning and all that stuff, something you brought up in the past that I'd like to reiterate in this podcast for our listeners is, a park sold is a single dollar amount. A park that is still in circulation as a public resource is an ongoing asset to the community. That's, picnics, that's memorials, that's different things. That's a million childhood memories for the instant of $500,000 or $1 million or something like that for the benefit of a very vast few. You know what I mean?
Right, right.
That's like an ecosystem that will never be generated again, too, especially like when there's old growth forest there. That will never be recreated or managed again. And I'm not anti-logging. I mean, that's okay to log managed lands and having some of that set aside. But when there are parks and when there are old growth forests set aside, that's for our future generations. And that's being thoughtful, that's reasonable. That's not a liberal, woke voice or a conservative voice when you're a logger or these identity politics involved. Let's stop with that. It's nonsense. This is common sense. We are trying to um, look out for our future and our children and our families and people to enjoy society, and we've had our society built this way for a long time, and this has been a struggle for a long time too, since the 30s, or when they started doing these land and planning laws and policies and antitrust laws and anti-monopoly laws, and those are all getting squeezed out because people are finding loopholes, and that's what our current politics are doing. So that's why it's very difficult to have trust when you know this cronyism is in place, and it's not for our future. And so when you're looking for loopholes, like, it breaks the system down that's supposed to be in place for us to be able to have these niceties. Once they're gone, it's gone. You can't get it back the same quality as it was.
Yeah.
And then that leads us to the next question that Larry posed, which I have to, does the county have an educated advisory committee, or are land use decisions made by appointed commissioners? And I do believe that they are appointed commissioners with the hope that they would be educated. I think Betsy has the answer for that one, but I'm almost positive that, planning.
There's a planning commission, right? You know that, but ultimately the vote is the three county commissioners. So whatever. Um, and even, so some of these land use stuff, when they change land, there'll be a planning commission that'll consider those kinds of things first. And they are all appointed by the Douglas County Commissioners.
Right.
And, like Kevin said, hopefully they're educated. But then again, then you rely upon staff, planning,
Right.
and then, development, building, which are different.
Yeah, and
Yep.
then you got like this other part of the lack of trust is connecting your friends into some of these leadership positions. And you're, like, uh placing, if somebody's dropping out of a race, and then all of a sudden they're in a position that they weren't qualified for, or that you might have known them in a logging like past logging job, and then they maybe are heading up the parks jobs, and maybe somebody related to me, and I don't know the team's qualifications, and I trust that the people that are working are talented for our county. I've worked with amazing people here in Douglas County, leading the way. And at the same time, if you've been in a position of power and influence for a long time, and other people start to see that those people, and or that they're connected and friends or in tight circles and run in those same circles, and they get the leadership jobs too, there's questioning going on. And that's part of term limits too, because when you start getting into those positions of power, that those kinds of things start happening more the longer that you're in the position.
Yeah. Yeah, it is interesting. I agree with Betsy. I think there's at least one, the main planning commission, and I think there might be other smaller ones throughout, for specific areas like the Callahan Ridge Planning Commission. However, the commissioners only get recommendations from those committees and commissions. They don't have to follow them whatsoever, and often don't. As far as Larry's other comment, I 100% agree that parks are an essential part of any type of healthy community, and really help bring the community together. So yeah, very good.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right, Larry. That's really smart planning. And that's once again, those types of comments, when you're in a position of leadership, you kind of forget about that kind of stuff. That's why it's important to have people like Larry and keep us fresh on our toes in our spaces, um, and welcome people into spaces, and in these workshops or being out in our community, that our other Larrys out there remind us that parks help increase values of homes in the areas and stuff like that. Because you
Yeah.
kind of start drifting or forget about these little nuances, and those are helpful reminders.
Well, and that leads
Well,
to our next question. Oh, Betsy, please.
I was just going to say, and this discussion reminds me that, particularly you're mentioning green area, that there are, communities that are very similar to cities in the county's jurisdiction, right? Because,
Right.
county commissioners have no say over what happens in the city of Roseburg.
Right.
Um, and sometimes they don't even like to talk to each other. Is it what it appears and what I hear? Um, but the Green Oaks Park, that's a park that was owned by the county, has a full infrastructure. At this point, people who are in the homeless and housing, arena are eyeing that for an RV park for homeless people. It could be a very, way to get some people off the street and provide stability. One of the reasons I was told it ended up closing down is because the county was not maintaining it. And it started, to kind of get a little bit raggedy looking, and a lot of folks who were unhoused in that area kind of took up residence in the park. And but the other thing and trigger my and we have other communities like that. So when you look at it, it's more like a city block, a city neighborhood than it is the more rural county, big lots between each other. And you have Camas Valley, right? And that's not a city itself. And you have other areas that are like that the county has probably that planning authority to do, right? And people who even live in the country like that, when you have small kids, when you have kids, you would like to probably have a park. And I used to, when we first moved up here, we lived in Glide. There was a schoolyard, which was good and could be a place. But that's another option that I haven't seen a connection in this land use planning in Green Oaks. There's two schools. There's a middle school and an elementary school. They don't have the population to support that. So the school district has been talking for quite a while, and I got this from a former school member, board member, that and I was talking to him that it would be great to have one of those become a park and a community center because they were talking about consolidating the two schools together. And I don't know about you, but when I went to school in a suburban neighborhood of LA, we went from kindergarten to sixth grade, all the way to the same school with all of us together. So it's not like it's a unique model. um, to do. So they could do it through eighth grade even. So
So one of the
um,
other things that I would do as the commissioner too, if I were um, and like blessed enough to be selected, is work with the city on certain things. I think that these boundaries and county versus city boundaries and to benefit the public is really important. And I know recently there was an example where the city was trying to negotiate with the county to be able to put in trails. I don't know if they were walking trails or bike trails near Sunrise Apartments, but part of it was the county land, and they had to negotiate a trade. And I don't know all the details of that, but I do know that maybe just being really thoughtful that the city is in our county and that we can be, it's not a us them thing, that it's a contiguous boundary, that we can maximize resources when we're leveraging them and collaborating and getting the people that there was somebody that spoke to the city about this bike trail. They were very thankful, but there's a group of volunteers. There's a lot of people who want to improve areas of Douglas County and are giving their time to do that. And so let's make it easier. And there are also ways that you could do tax breaks and with this planning. And so just really looking at all the ways that we could be prosperous and, you know, work together to make progress around our housing struggles. That's the other part of transparency. Uh, Commissioner Freeman did a better job. They've been kind of talking a little bit more in the commissioner meetings. And he explained his line of thinking about why he was voting yes for the RT20 policy. And one of them was his ideas that if people he used some numbers, just off the, like, some idea numbers, and if these many people built houses, then it makes room for um, a houses that people live in the city can move into the other places, and it makes more room for houses, so forth, like that domino effect. And, so it was an idea, but it was a stretch. And if the county were to say, besides trying to stretch to make this RT20 policy work, like we're trying to address housing issues and make that stretch that way, versus we're also looking at these other ways to make housing, address housing the best way we can address housing. One of the things that the commissioners said was, Douglas County has a grant, like a federal grant that comes through where people uh, we have a grant where we have, it's through the juvenile justice. I think it's probably it's state, but probably funneled through federal dollars. But that these state funds help with resources to link people that have been incarcerated and homeless into housing. And at the same time, we are short housing here. So how are we addressing building more houses? And so if he were to say something like that, like, the county is looking at ways that we can look at uh, planning and trying to expand housing in our county in these other ways, then we might not be so, like, distrusting of this RT20 that just went through.
Well, and I mean, the usual paradigm is that they get this money to go lobby for federal dollars for timber resources, but all this money would be better well spent if they were lobbying for federal money for housing or all this other different things that they can do. Coos Bay and Eugene get housing grants all the time. Why do we only get federal? Or why are we only excited when the feds finally decide to chop down more trees?
That's right, Kevin. Perfect target.
And
And yeah,
I just want to circle back to what you said, Lori, and I just want to highlight exactly the kind of logic that our current commissioners are thinking with. What he said was is that if we build 200 houses on these 20-acre lots, and those 200 houses each have 4 people in it, then we can have 800 more beds in the county. In how illogical, I'm trying not to curse. How dumb to think that you're going to affect the housing crisis in Douglas County at all by creating houses that are going to be $600,000 to $700,000 a piece. He said in that same meeting that he found a 5-acre lot with a trailer on it, and it was 300,000. So if you multiply that times 4, and then take a little bit because there's no structure, it's just land. You are talking, $600,000-$700,000. So just be clear, that's how they think they're going to solve the housing crisis, is by creating housing that there's nobody that is desperately needs housing can ever even dream of affording, unless they're planning on using some of that acreage for homeless camps, which, I don't think that's the plan.
Well, and this also circles back to what Betsy was saying, which is the use of our community spaces, especially in these rural areas, because we're a rural community, and they're not utilized enough, especially if they're being undervalued as a park and they're using that as an excuse to close them.
Yeah.
we're talking about keeping young people here and how we're keeping our workforce, our people who are keeping retirees happy and working in the all these homes and things like that. And frankly, that's because they're not getting resources at home. You know, people had to. I've all my family and friends moved away from Glide because they didn't have a place that was cheap enough to rent or a place to land on their feet when stuff got bad during the winter. You know, I was
Yeah.
blessed after high school to find a really, really cheap studio with the help of my aunt on Buckhorn Road. But still, that doesn't cut the cake. And still, you're out in the middle of nowhere. And to speak on Tim Freeman's point on $300,000 for a trailer and 5 acres, you know, I wonder what the condition of that trailer is being because
Right.
you know I've also been looking at houses recently around the county, and yeah, you could probably find that. But that's exactly like you're saying. That money's devoted to the acreage. Looking at that trailer, you know, I wonder if it's moth eaten out, how rotted it is, you know what I mean? How soft that floor is and what you're going to have to replace. You know what I mean? I just, you know, that's the kind of situation a majority of the citizens are living like in Douglas County is in those, you know, those under they're underutilized because they're still sitting there from the 70s when frankly they should have been
Yeah.
revamped, you know, and we don't take, you know, just like Shane Kelly was saying, I know he couldn't make it to the meeting tonight, but he was talking about we're the timber capital of the world and we should be producing all the things to make the houses here. Not only is that jobs, but we're producing things to make housing in our backyard.
Yeah. Yeah. How out of touch is Tim Freeman? Because the other thing he said in that meeting, he said that, whenever he's talking about this 5 acres with the trailer on it, he's like, well, any lumber worker back, 20 years ago could easily have bought that and his wife stay at home. We'll leave the sexist part of that statement out. But his wife can stay at home and they can afford this. And it's like, are you so out of touch with reality today that you honestly think a single or a mill worker or a forest worker by themselves can afford $300,000 mortgage? I don't think he's living in reality anymore. And it's just not that way.
At
Um,
least not with the mortgages the way they are. I mean, hell, if you put
right,
6% down on a 7 or a 10 year mortgage, that's still going to be 1,500 a month. I mean, like that's
right,
ridiculous. And you're going to be surviving off of $400. You're out on a 20-acre
right.
parcel. Gas is another thing, not to mention all the things that go along with it.
That's
And
30 year.
PMI,
That's a 30-year mortgage, Kevin, for
right.
that. So I attended or watched and this applies to planning and land use and or just planning and taxes and all of that economic development. It's all tied together. And so I watched On the Verge when Boyce was on, and he related that the top four concerns of our county people were taxes, like the fees and costs of living, homelessness, economic development, and diversifying that, and housing affordability. And then he also related how one of his top like achievements that he was proud of was bringing he was an administrator for bring like Roseburg Forest Products approached him or the county to be an administrator because they could tap this special fund, and it was the strategic investment program, like a federal and a federal benefit like program. And so it brought in 750 million. And I don't he said it was multifaceted. I don't know if Coos County was involved in that, but there was tax incentives and for businesses in Oregon around that. And so one of the things I find interesting is that Roseburg Forest Products now has their headquarters, I think it's in North Carolina. And recently, I don't know if they've closed down here, but they definitely laid off recently at least 150 people in the last couple months and leaning towards automating. And which is, it's fine and good for business. But there was this other side that I attended a workshop that could be for people. It was a strategic, like an investment program, but the last word was jobs, and it was for people and employees side. And so I definitely am for business, and that's really important. But we also need to be looking out for our people. And this benefit would be that the people could buy a mill and convert the mill into like a anything like wood related manufacturing products and stuff like that, which with land use, if you were trying to look out for progress and prosperity for your county, that you would be looking out for that side as well, not and trying to be creative with that, and not just companies that are already wealthy and have both sides generating for prosperity for the people and looking out for that as well. And so that would be something that I would do as the commissioner, is being, what about these other sides? Because there is always the other side to it. And the fact that it helped administrate it, that was great, and I'm sure he learned a lot, and it's a good thing. But also, when you're in those positions of power, that means that you're that person. They came to him for the opportunity. It wasn't like he was trying to generate it or innovate it or advocate for it for our county, and that is okay. That's average, and that's what we have. And when we've been out there learning and experiencing other ways of business and innovation, and tapping federal programs and county programs and dollars and budgets and maximizing resources and understanding how to make your way in those systems and integrating them, then you've got skills. And that's what this county needs, is some skills in those power places of influence. And we need that where it's not those, sometimes I'm hearing them say that's not my job. They don't know what they're talking about, those candidates out there. I definitely know, Andrew, we as the town hall people definitely know what we're talking about. And when you're in positions of power, you have influence and you collaborate and you open doors and windows of opportunities. It might not be my job to facilitate that whole endeavor or project, but you definitely are looking out for your people.
Yeah, like I said, the public land is our land. We're the owners of that land. And it's amazing how the current commissioner never goes out and talks to the owners of the land before they make decisions of what they're going to do with it. One thing that I just wanted to bring up, because it is an idea that is kind of new and kind of different that I had, and I've been floating it around a little bit, and it's that, whenever it's county or it's federal land, there is no corporation behind that has to make a profit, right? And that allows us to do some different things with that land in order to ensure that we're creating jobs in the county. And what I mean by that, and I'll use ONC land as an example. Right now, ONC land, whenever there's a contract that's put out, BLM puts out the contract, says we're going to clear cut this many acres as this many board feet, and then timber companies come in and bid on it. 75% of whatever the winning contract bid is goes to the county, and that's how the county gets a small portion of its funding. What I'm proposing is that we switch that contracting style, and this is a little technical, on its head a little bit, where we, instead of prioritizing what the largest bid is, we prioritize who hires the most folks in Douglas County. So if one company comes in and they say, we will bid $2 million on this parcel of land, and we're going to create 5 jobs for 3 months. And then a second company comes in and says, you know what, we're only going to bid $100,000 on this parcel of land, but we're going to do thinning and it's going to take us a year and a half and we're going to employ 50 people. That's an easy decision for the county to say, let's put these people to work and sacrifice some of that funding that comes to the county. So, you know, maybe that's a good idea, maybe it's a bad idea. The point is that we need to have fresh and different ways of looking at things and saying, how do we get out of this endless cycle of madness that we're in right now and start to use our natural resources for the people that own those natural resources, the people of the county. So yeah, that's one of the things I'll really push for is having an education or an educated committee that can bring those fresh ideas. Some people will have years of experience, some people will be brand new, and it's important to have that cross section so you have those new ideas.
I think that's great, Andrew, because it does push, into the land use of how we can leverage our resources to maximize opportunities for the people, because that's what this is about. We're the top we have a lot of poverty. We're top there, top unemployment. We have to consider that and really try to bring socioeconomic, opportunities and growth for people that live in Douglas County. And the other thing I've got another idea about land use, but I did want to go back to the RT20 that we were talking about earlier. I don't know even if it's beneficial because I know that they have the lumber tax shelter laws as well. And I don't know how that complements or detracts from Douglas County, but because Douglas County is 50% federally owned lands, that complicates our land use and tax base and, you know, funds and resources that we use for our county budget. So that's something to consider. That's unique to our county. And then the other thing that I talked a little bit about was being able to collaborate better with the city, but another partner is Cow Creek. When I'm learning a little bit from the city that the county, I don't exactly remember, my brain went a little bit blank right now, but if they get tax breaks after a certain amount of years, and so then they're not paying into the taxes once it kind of goes into a trust. So once Cow Creek's makes a purchase and then they let's say it's 20 years or whatever, and or they rent, or I don't exactly know the details, but once it goes into a trust, then they're not paying taxes on that, and so that's something to consider. And then the other thing is to consider partnering as the county, city, and tribal lands over how to maximize progress as well. Like, do we do work groups and how to leverage our resources for prosperity for our people?
Yeah, I think the point I was trying to make earlier about the Green Oaks Park and the school district is that need to collaborate. It would seem to me the county could collaborate with the Roseburg School District, to see about whether they can help facilitate even the idea, that community center and park there and help the school consolidate it. So partnerships with everyone. I do want to say that the problem with the argument that I've historically been made about the Cow Creek and the property tax exemption and stuff that they have and not paying property taxes. For one, we have a community that, regardless of what people believe, provide very little social human services, period. Okay. We do not provide anything near what homeless people, for example, can get in Eugene and Springfield, and pretty much even Grants Pass at this point, which is a similar size of city and equally red as far as the county politics are concerned. So the Cow Creek tribe, for one, provides a lot of resources to help not just tribal members, but other people in this community. So I, for one, would, whatever they buy good, I'm going to think they're going to be a hell of a lot better stewards than most people who are going to be buying shit here. Okay.
Yeah.
The other thing is that nonprofits, 501c3 profits have property tax exemptions. Okay, their landlords have property tax exemptions. So, and there's the same reason is we need them. I'm not sure I even believe in that system anymore, but right now in Douglas County, we need the kind of 501c3 operations because they too are doing what government should. So the tribal government is doing what our regular government should do, and nonprofits are doing the job of what our government should do, in my opinion. So both of those, they're not going to pay taxes, and we get more in return than anything we would get in property taxes out of those properties. So and but that is something that has to be dealt with. It does put an economic strain. And if we
Right,
don't look at high paying jobs, we will forever be a poverty pit.
right.
And then as far as the tax breaks and or the prosperity goes with the tax breaks, that's really important. Oh, I know what I was going to say to this. I think part of the culture of our county commissioners, I've heard them say in the last meeting that it's like no big government. We don't want government and to ask for that. And so part of that like went through with the libraries, right? Like we're not asking for grants and money coming in. And so they're not trying to generate money. It's just kind of more like, okay, we're on this committee and it's here, instead of going and finding it and bringing it here, instead of looking at it like it's a welfare thing to do, it's our tax dollars and it's the systems in place for our county to access tax dollars that have already been paid. And when we're not trying to access that, then we're not bringing money into our county, and these safety net services that our people that live in are in poverty deserve to have those breaks as well. I mean, people that work at Walmart and work two jobs that are hard working people are qualifying for SNAP and still living below the poverty line. It's not that, oh, pull up your bootstraps and live, it's more subsidizing the wealthy instead of the wealthy giving, fair pay. So I just say that I know it's a little bit off, but I think it's the culture of a long-term commissioners being in there thinking this is big government and that you're asking for welfare, when it's actually you're bringing in money that wouldn't be there, that's going to go somewhere else, and it's the way we access tax dollars that have been paid.
Agreed.
Oh, anybody have any other comments, final comments about this? Have we beat this horse to death?
Or overfed the fed horse with
No, I just want to piggyback on what Lori said. It is about quality of life, especially when it comes to the parks and be able to camp and do that kind of stuff. And the fact that they defunded our libraries just goes to show how quality of life doesn't matter then. That is not, a handout. Having a library, come on. It's ridiculous, honestly. So yeah,
It's
great.
data informed that when our children are around books from the beginning, that they do better in life. Just hand them a book. That's why the Dolly Parton, her community was um, uh, really low on reading scores and not graduating high school. And she started the Dolly Parton Library and gives out lots of books and all of that. And as a foundation, and it skyrocketed. The people graduated high school, and Betsy, you're around literacy. The fact that our youth are around and the adults value the books is important. And then how much more do you set the stage with having community libraries? And this is amazing that our communities are able to access resources and grants to keep them open, and got creative in being able to keep the buildings open in some of the ways. But it's getting harder and harder, and when our leadership isn't trying to value that, it sets a message. And especially since our youth, in Douglas County, we have high numbers of youth that need special education as well. And so we need to look out for youth and families and offer these opportunities when people don't know this data, that being around books makes you smarter and grow and prosperous later in life.
I think when they were defunding the library, I was involved in the county commission because I used to go to the budget hearings as the years they would cut funding for the library. And I think it might have been the New York Times that called us the Appalachia of the West, because of that library. And then at the same time, we've had this problem with getting medical professionals here, doctors to stay here, right? That's been historic. And the whole idea is doctors are probably not real enamored if they have kids with, going to a community that doesn't even support libraries, right? And what's the quality of the school system if that's happening in that community? So it's actually really bad economic development policy. Really, it is. So, Larry what would you be in the job description for a member of your planning and zoning advisory committee?
Yeah, I'll take that one first because we have friends that might be just about to arrive, so I may jump off. You know, what I would look for is somebody, I would want a varied just, pool of people to be a part of that. So coming up with one description would take a little bit of time, more time than I have right now, because, I do want somebody who has tons of experience with zoning, with planning, and with understanding how things operate in Douglas County. And then I would want somebody who maybe focuses on sustainability and the environment, and then somebody else who is a farmer who really understands, when things need to be planted, where the good places are. So it's not a single job description. It's getting the right group of people together with the right expertise, where you're not being pulled to one direction or other. You're being pulled towards the truth and some new and fresh ideas. So can't really answer your question directly tonight, but it would be a cross section of varied people and very subject matter experts to bring in.
Yeah, and to Andrew's point, like it's already in place, right? The commission's already in place, the descriptions, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. These working systems are effective and quality. It's about the selection process and what seats you want. So if you have to change I don't know what they call them here or on the commission level, like if it's the bylaws or what our expectations are for having certain uh, like qualifications for the people that fit those seats. So, and I agree with Andrew on that and what we would do, and rely on the people that are in the planning department too. We would be liaisons, and we would get their insights as to what works. And when you are sometimes new leadership gives it opens up the floodgate for talent to shine. And so we would be giving that opportunity for our planning department and the people that the head coordinators we would be working with to be those people too.
All right. Well, thank you both. For 2 weeks from now, we were going to do another roundtable, and I just threw out there the accountability transparency stuff, and I put it up on the card that this was advertised through. Hadn't we haven't decided the last two because there's going to be three more if we do it every 2 weeks. So if you have ideas, if you don't, if the next one you want a different topic, please let us know. I don't know that Kevin is wed to any particular topic. Are you, Kevin?
No, I'm not wed to any particular comment. Anything that might help you guys out.
So, and maybe whatever the people have been asking you about, that kind of thing. So if you have it, just let me know what you want so I can update the card. And if you have it, I did schedule these for on the calendar. I put for after the Friday after election day. If for some reason you wanted to, make comments, but we certainly don't have to do that. So thank you very much for being here. And we did give an excused absence to Shane and Nick because they're doing a good deed with the natural plants in their community in Myrtle Creek. So to take advantage of being outside. All
Yeah, for
right.
their
Thank you.
library. There,
Yep.
yes. Thank you for having us. It's great. Thank you. Appreciate you guys.
Welcome. Thanks.